All right. We here yet? Okay. Here we are on another Wednesday, the 14th. Today we're going to talk about who becomes the workplace bully, and or not who becomes, who is the workplace bully, which both of those things are directly related, who is and who becomes. And if you haven't gone to exposing workplace bullying on the podcast, this is something that we go into a little more in depth of, and you can get to the podcast by going to Stop Bully Culture /podcast, and it'll come up there for you. The reason it's so important to talk about who the workplace bully is that's key in organizations needing to intervene appropriately. So identifying that person and or persons is really important. So let's start off with talking about who we think is the workplace bully, or maybe a better way to say that is explanations that are out there around who is the workplace bully. First, I want to say this, as a person who has been bullied, one of the things that we do oftentimes when you're being bullied is just trying to figure out who the hell that person is that's so damn evil, right? What type of person, right? For myself, what type of person comes around the table and charges around the table in an academic setting who is a social worker? I mean, who does that? What type of person talks about me in front of students, right? It's so, and the reality is lots of the explanations focus on the behavior of the bully, not necessarily who is the bully. So there's a lot of explanation and kind of lists that characterize and talk about the bully based on their tactics. So like I would have, if I was going to make a category based on somebody charging around the table, I might say charging, Charlie or something like that. The reality is that that person who charged around the table at me, that wasn't their signature move, right? Charging around the table. They were doing a lot of other playbooks and tactics from bullies. They were engaged in a lot of abusive behavior. So those explanations, when we talk about, when we characterize the bully based on what they do, it's okay to do that, but the problem is we very often characterize people based on what we can see. And, charging Charlie was also lying her ass off about me behind my back, telling people, what a horrible person I was. And, she was sabotaging my work and undermining who I was. She wasn't just doing one thing. And we like the idea of being able to characterize a person based on what they do. What they do is because the reality of being bullied, and with workplace bullies, we can't wrap our head around rationally how someone that is our colleague and oftentimes might even be our boss is just so horrible. And so many of the explanations focus on, people having personality disorders. Those are the people who are bullies. Especially narcissism, right? We like the idea because the behavior feels narcissistic, and it feels like in the workplace that we have one person, which we often do, who is really just all about themselves. Like a narcissist, everything focuses on me, I'm the main thing, and when you're being bullied, from my perspective, did having someone come around the table feel like a narcissistic? Well, I don't know if it was narcissism, but it felt damn wrong. I had, you know, a chair in the same department who it's like she couldn't stop coming after me, right? Because she thought I don't know what she thought, to be honest with you. I mean, I know what I think I thought, what she thought, but that doesn't mean that is what she was thinking. But everything was about her, right? She would, one time she'd be, you know, yelling and screaming at somebody, and the next she'd be bawling like a baby, you know, and so her moods would swing, and, you know, was she narcissistic? I don't know, but some of the stuff she did felt like it was, you know, that she was only thinking about herself. You know, interestingly enough, she's still doing the same thing 10, 15 years later because nobody has held her accountable. I knew a colleague who worked with her last year and called me and said, "You're not going to believe what I walked past in the hallway," which was this same person who bullied me yelling at somebody else and swearing and calling them names, right? So sure, could that be a personality disorder? Yeah, maybe it could. But when we look at the math, right, about 1 in 10, okay, depending on where you're looking for that source, about 1 in 10 people have a personality disorder. I had 4 bullies in a department of 13. When we look at it from that perspective, the math doesn't add up that I would end up with 4 people with personality disorders in the same department. Could it happen? Yeah, sure. Do I think it did? No, I don't. So I personally and professionally don't buy into the idea that bullies are narcissists. Some of their abuse feels narcissistic, and I don't believe that because somebody has a personality disorder, that makes them a workplace bully. Are they more at risk? Yeah, maybe. But even people with mental health disorders and personality disorders can be held accountable. And that brings me to my own idea of who the workplace bully is. I want to say one other thing is I think those definitions and those explanations, first off, are reductionist, right? It reduces bullying down to a trait, right? Or something wrong with the person, rather than thinking about the environment or the organization and the culture that the person is working in. And the other point I want to just quickly make is that we love the idea. I know I did for a very long time. I bought into the idea that there was a type of bully, right? That they engaged in a type of bullying tactics, and that they were narcissistic and had personality disorder, because as a person who was bullied, that is comforting. That is something I can say, that's what's wrong with them. That's what's wrong with that person. Did I call the person who charged around the table at me? Did I think about her from the perspective of having a mental health disorder? Damn straight I did. Do I think she does? I don't know, because I can't diagnose somebody by observing their behavior against me. I'm not necessarily objective to the person who physically threatened and intimidated me at work. I'm just saying, I'm not. I have a different view of her than other people. So it's very reductionist, because the other thing, it minimizes. When I can say those people are bullies, okay? When I can say those people with mental health disorders are bullies, then what I can also say to myself is, it's those people who are bullies, not people like me. So then I say normal, whatever that is, right? Our social construction of what we think normal is. I can say someone like me could never be someone like her, someone like the bully. So then we can say it's them, not us. It's not me. But the reality is, first off, let me just say this, is we're not teaching people how to interact, engage, and even behave in the workplace. We don't teach people about what is acceptable behavior. We have the assumption that somehow when you go into a workplace, especially a professional setting, that you magically learn how to communicate, that you know how to solve and resolve conflict, that you don't take things personally, that you don't have bias against people. All of those things that I just said are baloney. We do come to work as ourselves, right? I come to work as Jan, and all the baggage that I have comes with me. How I learn to solve conflict or resolve conflict from oftentimes your family. That's how you resolve conflict unless you learn a skill. So we have all these people coming to work with all these different backgrounds and different selves, okay? And we put them together and we assume they can interact appropriately. You see the problem with that? I do. And you can't. And I also want to say this. If we look at my profession and the people who bullied me, they were social workers. We again make the assumption, falsely I might add, that people who have particular degrees know how to do certain things. Like we expect social workers to be able to see people for who they are and put their bias aside. Well, here's the flaw in that, is we're not teaching social workers to do that very well, frankly, with clients, and we're not doing it at all to teach them how to put their bias aside and work with their colleagues. So that's one way, again, that assumption that people know how to do these things is baloney. The other assumption is because I take a conflict resolution class, I can then take what the class taught and apply it to work. Nah, it doesn't work that way. You have to practice what you learn, and you have to have somebody saying to you, Jan, we took this class on conflict resolution, which says first you do A, B, C, and you're going right to D. You're not framing the conflict in a way that's beneficial, that is clear to the person you're having conflict with. You're not talking about anything in regards to resolution, okay? So you have to be able to take what you learn and apply it, and that is not as easy as it sounds, because I already think I know everything. So take your conflict resolution, and I ain't going to do it because I don't want to. But if people would be held accountable by their bosses in saying, yeah, you're supposed to be doing it this way, and I saw that you're not, let's go back and practice, okay, so that I can learn how to do those things in the moment. Because then it's just a waste of professional development money when people can't apply what they've learned. So that brings me to who are workplace bullies. The reality is, it may be a tough reality, anybody can be a workplace bully because we learn how to be a bully in the workplace. Yes, some people come to the workplace with maybe what I would call being more at risk to become a workplace bully. For example, one of the things that I have seen consistently through all of the bullies I have observed and watched is that they come across as confident. They come across as highly skilled. And for the record, some of them are actually skilled, have some skills. But lots of times there's still what I call a flawed sense of self, meaning that there's lots of insecurities, and they don't see themselves as the person they're representing. So you can have, and I did have plenty of chairs of departments who were, for the most part, fairly competent, but they presented themselves as being the be-all and end-all, and the reality is you could see how they reacted, how they framed things, how they talked to other people, that they did not see themselves in the way they wanted to be seen. So that flawed sense of self, when you don't feel good about yourself, whether you agree with this or not, it is empowering, and it makes you feel better when you can make somebody else feel small. Bullying is empowering. Not only is it empowering, when you go into the workplace, when you cycle in to a place where there's bullying, you learn bullying because it's normalized. Yelling gets you promoted. Taking people out behind their back and spreading rumors and going to your boss lying about somebody in the workplace, that gets you a chair position, right? And so those behaviors that we consider abusive, which they are, like yelling, screaming, lying, gossiping, gaslighting, and the list goes on, those behaviors are normalized. Those behaviors are rewarded. Those behaviors are encouraged. What is not is resolving conflict appropriately, having flexibility and negotiating in the workplace, standing up for other people. Those, again, what we consider good skills, those behaviors are not normalized, those are penalized. And so when bullying is rewarded, people mimic it and continue to do it because that's the behavior that gets them ahead. And yeah, that's right. And then they get into leadership positions. And do they then say, hey, well, bullying is bad? No, because bullying has got them to that position. Because many times the person who is getting the promotion should not be, because they're getting it based on the power they wield in the workplace, not necessarily based on their skills. And so then they get into a leadership position, and it strengthens bullying. It doesn't weaken it, because they've become very good at bullying and people know they have power. And also what it says to everybody else who watches that person get promoted is that, if I want to get to the top, that's the behavior I must replicate. Because if bullying and bullies, if bullies had a personality disorder, and that is what causes them to bully, if you get rid of that person, then what should happen in the organization is bullying should stop. The person cycles out, the bully is gone, the personality disorder, the chaos person, the disruptive person with those characteristics cycles out. It should be gone. It doesn't. What happens is there's a position open for a bully, somebody else rolls over and cycles in, and bullying is continued because it's passed down generation, if you look at organizations, from generation to generation to generation in that organization, because it's part of the rules. It's part of the expectations. You become expected to go after Jan. You become expected to lie and cover for Bob. It's expected and rewarded for you to make complaints about me to HR. Those are the things that are rewarded. And so you do it because you want a job, because you want to get a bigger salary, because you want the better office, whatever it is. You replicate what is rewarded and you stomp on things that are consequenced in bully culture. That's good professional behavior. The problem is that when you are the person being bullied, like I was, you also know that yelling is normalized. So, can I go after Bob by yelling and lying and doing that? Yeah, I can, because that's what's expected. Okay? So people who are bullied get disempowered. Okay? It crushes your soul, frankly, to be bullied for so long. It influences your sense of self, and you get to a point where you think, screw this. So what often happens, if you stay in it long enough, people who started off as the victims of bullying maybe they cycle to a bystander, and then they eventually get to where they can be the bully, because that's the most powerful position. And so then they are the ones who are doing the bullying. So bullying is a learned behavior that is rewarded, and over time, anybody can be a bully. It's learned through socialization. That's the hard part, is we like the idea of Bob having a mental health disorder, Bob being narcissistic. We don't like the idea that Bob's a pretty normal guy that learned how to be and engage in abusive behavior because the system, the workplace, the organization is the one that created Bob. That's the problem. It is a learned behavior. The good thing about bullying being a learned behavior is that anything you bullying, the good thing about bullying being a learned behavior is that you can unlearn that behavior as well. So it's disheartening for somebody like me who's being bullied to think, oh, like buckets, they're normal people who have, even likable skills or likable qualities. Bob can be likable and be a bully. That's the hard part. But what happens is all of us are at risk. It isn't those people who become bullies. It's people who look like me. Anybody's at risk. But we can fix the problem by fixing organizations. That's the reality. If you have not listened to the podcast, go listen to it. Of course, I think it's good. I'm biased that way. The other couple of things I do just want to say is that I've also updated Stop Bully Culture. I've added a few things and rearranged to make the website more user-friendly. So please go visit that. There's a lot of resources on that. Every 2 weeks, I update with a new article. So please check that out. As per usual, if there's anything I can do, please let me know, and I will see you next week.